There's always been this kind of interesting phenomenon with artists where they're able to build a career out of a sense of relatability. But what happens is so many people connect with the art that they made that they start becoming really successful. They start becoming really popular and rich until they get so far removed from where they started that they no longer have the qualities that people gravitated towards in the first place.
I'm Emma Chamberlain, and welcome to my house. I'm just saying that I think the appeal of what is authentic and relatable actually comes from the fact that it is not authentic and relatable and is instead aspirational. It wasn't intentional for my apartment to look like a Halloween town type of situation.
But it's intentional now.
Something I've talked about on this channel before is kind of the rise and death of vloggers, and I'll put a little link to that right there. But essentially the premise of the video was kind of that I feel like people generally fall in and out of vlog lifestyle type content a lot quicker than they do with other types of content. And I think it's kind of interesting because recently Emma Chamberlain put out a podcast speaking about the death of the influencer. And I think a lot of the points that she made were correct and also
relatively self-aware.
But I found the whole topic interesting because it kind of focused on how the way that influencers kind of became famous is kind of inevitably what's become their demise. So something that I wanted to talk about in this video is kind of Emma Chamberlain and I guess kind of the loss or death of relatability. Nothing new here, y'all. If you're coming for originality, leave. And also Instagram versus reality and the way we kind of always tried to curate this authenticity and relatability online that was kind of never real. So let's dive into it. So something that was originally very interesting to me in the podcast was kind of the way she talked about how star power is kind of dying because of the way that
everybody
can be an influencer, and so much of what is being an influencer is sharing so much of your life, and lifestyle fashion type content is so easy to get into. Everyone and their mama is posting fashion type TikToks that the definition of influencer might be dying out because it's something that's accessible that everybody can do. However, I kind of think that I might disagree with the premise that it's something that everybody can do. I don't know that everybody has what it takes to become an influencer, and I think it kind of weirdly connected with her recent house tour, which was
stunning.
Wish I'd started posting these little stupid YouTube videos 10 years ago. But the fact that what she did is not replicable. Not anyone can do it. And the fact that I think it's worth examining kind of a little more detailed what exactly is so appealing about influencers like herself in the first place and why I don't think that anyone can do it and I don't think there's kind of a death of influencer. First of all, I do believe was a pretty big product of timing. She came in at a good time to be on YouTube and do what she kind of did. I think that the kind of lifestyle content that she was doing at the time, albeit kind of very young, quirky, and appealing to a very Gen Z type audience, I don't know that a lot of people were doing it. If anything, I think it pretty heavily influenced day in the life content as it is right now. She wasn't the only person that was doing it at the time, but I think she's probably gone the furthest off of it. And I do think it's interesting because she herself says that a lot of people get famous not necessarily off of talent, but from their
personality.
And it's very much lifestyle and personality driven content, which she admits that her herself kind of blew up off of as well. But I think what it kind of fails to realize is that there's still an element of what she did and who she was that wasn't like everyone else. And maybe in her environment, it felt like kind of a rags to riches type story. But I do think that there's still an element of it that has to be admirable and something that we hope to pursue that makes it something that we care about. Because I don't think just anybody with any old average life or anyone with a banana or a mooncake could do what Emma did. Because despite the fact that yes, she was a everyday teenage girl, she was just kind of going to school and doing her thing, she was still in a weird way living a life that a lot of people can aspire to. She was living in LA, she had this group of friends. She eventually kind of became the popular girl where her group of friends became James Charles and it's on the tip of my tongue. The Dolan twins. The Dolan twins. I knew that. I didn't Google it just now. Once you, I guess, kind of move past her very early days of YouTube and get into her blow up, despite the fact that she might not have been living in the insane amounts of glam that a lot of her contemporaries were living in, especially, I guess, growing up in Los Angeles, there was still a lot of aspects of her life that were still very unattainable, but not too unattainable. I think there's something to be said about what makes influencers today still desirable in that form is having a sense of being better than us, but only so much better than us. It's relatable and something seemingly achievable at the same time. Everything about her life at the time was
Kind of like ours.
we were kind of in high school, kind of living a life like that. We weren't wealthy and internet famous and like the it girl, but it didn't feel totally out of our realm of possibility. Then you kind of see all this kind of stuff cropping up about the death of relatability when we move past the point where it's achievable. I think what happened is not necessarily that we stopped caring for influencers, but they all rocket to a point of success so quick that we lose that chunk of time in the middle where they're kind of like us and kind of better than us, and they so quickly catapult into just being so much better than us so quickly that they just don't feel relatable anymore. And maybe she's right. Maybe that does have to do with how quickly you can get internet fame now with apps like TikTok, because truly and wonderfully you can blow up relatively quickly. But I think we can make the argument that they've always been a little out of reach in terms of relatability, and what actually happened is just they became too unrelatable, and that's when we started being like,
They're not relatable.
really, they started being so successful they just weren't aspirational anymore. Because realistically, aiming to have the level of success that Emma does, I'm not saying don't shoot high, but I'm saying that's very fucking high. We see it with a lot of the Vogue makeup routines too. It's a very similar vibe of like, oh, I do my skincare routine 2 hands at a time.
Just like you.
But you can't help but notice the opulence of the background behind them. You can't help but notice that their bathroom is about as big
As my entire apartment.
The point being that there is less a loss of relatability, and the fact that the stepping stone for relatability has just kind of gotten a little higher. It's a lot more for us now to try to mimic. And it still is an interesting kind of dichotomy to say that influencer culture is dying. And I don't know that it's dying. In an interesting way, I think that the fact that it's become as oversaturated as it does, which is kind of something that she mentioned, it's almost going to just become a lot more exclusive than it was. Because unfortunately, the entire premise of what's worth having is usually something that's luxury, is usually tied to inherently being exclusive. The fact that technically anyone can do it, in that anyone can make a YouTube video, make a TikTok or whatever, I think only means that what counts as a celebrity, what counts as an influencer, is only going to become a tighter and tighter, a harder and harder. It's only going to become harder and harder to achieve. It's only going to become more and more aggressive to count as that. But I think as well, from a consumer point of view and the way that people view these people, is the bar for what's worth watching is going to continue to get higher. And we've already seen that in YouTube. The expectation of the quality of content that you're going to get when you watch a YouTube video, a Twitch stream, a TikTok, whatever,
is high.
Vine, for example, kind of had the charm of being homemade, and I don't think that that really flies anymore. Some pop off when we have a little homemade moment that's kind of funny and we're like, that had Vine energy, which usually just means it looks like it was recorded on a flip phone. And in a way I was saying before, this kind of does tie into the Instagram versus reality trend, something else that I feel like is quite big online right now. Because its entire point is to create this sense of authenticity online, and I guess relatability that seemingly wasn't there before. It's trying to curate relatability, which in and of itself is
confusing.
But we move.
Because a lot of what I will see on my timeline is mostly fitness influencers that like to do a flexed photo and then a relaxed photo, being like, oh my god, look, the skin on my back rolls just like yours. But ultimately, there's kind of a premise when you are online that the fact is nothing is real ever. Even the things that pretend to be authentic. And the reason why is because there's still a choice to share these things. There's still a choice at the way they film it. There's still angles involved. There's still lighting. There's still a level to it that can't ever really be fully authentic, kind of by virtue of the fact that it is always being shared. But the reason why things like this pop off so much is because authenticity is invaluable and it's an incredible sell. There are things that we can put online that appear to be more authentic than others, but none of it's authentic. None of it's real simply by virtue of the fact that it is curated and edited for consumption. That kind of already has to take away from how real it is. Not to mention, I do think that it can be useful and it can be helpful. I'm not trying to hate on this type of content. It has a place, and I don't think in the grand scheme of things that we have going on the internet that it's inherently bad or dangerous or even that negative. But I do think that it's important to acknowledge that I think a lot of these people actually in a weird way have a very similar effect that Emma did, in that most of the time the people who do this in a lot of ways have attractive attractive bodies. They have bodies that are aspirational. For the most part, I see coming from fitness influencers, but even those people that aren't fitness influencers are thin. They're coming from the thins, which, can I just say, I've been seeing online people using thin as a derogatory term. I'm sorry, but it's funny. It's funny, dude.
The thins?
That is so good. The thins are coming. The thins are coming. That being said, it's all people that have aspirational type bodies that we kind of follow them for, who are just like,
Guys,
my tummy rolls when I hunch over.
I'm just like you.
But they're not, dude. They're not. We know that they're not. Because they're famous online, probably because they're hot. Which, again, I'm gonna reiterate, I'm gonna say it again, is not a bad thing. I'm a very big believer in enjoy the fucking view. You know what I mean? Post as far as you goddamn can off
Pretty privilege. I don't give a fuck.
I'm just saying that I think the appeal of what is authentic and relatable actually comes from the fact that it is not authentic and relatable and is instead aspirational. Because a lot of these bodies are still aspirational bodies. I think a lot of us look at these fitness influencers and Instagram models in a very aspirational way. I think we're like, damn, I would love to be built like Mrs. Incredible.
And that's still not about me.
But ultimately, I think what we're drawn to is what is kind of aspirational versus what is necessarily relatable. And TikTok has allowed for us to see a lot more kind of aspirational people. So what was the point of this video? And what's the repoop? What was once a perceived similarity to us was never really there. What it was something we aspired to, and some people go beyond the point of it being reasonably aspirational, and some people don't. Suspend your disbelief and go watch Emma Chamberlain's house tour because it's a pretty fucking cool house.